Have you ever walked past someone sitting alone on the street and wondered, what's their story? How did they end up there, and does anyone truly care? Imagine braving the cold every single day, watching the world rush by without a second glance. What if one small act of kindness could change everything? This story will touch your heart and remind us all that compassion has the power to transform lives. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and if you believe in the power of kindness, be sure to hit subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where we share real stories that uplift, inspire, and encourage us to make a difference in the world. If this story moves you, don't keep it to yourself, comment, share, and help spread the message of kindness and hope. Now, let's dive into today's heartwarming story and see how one unexpected encounter led to a moment of pure humanity that will stay with you forever. Lindenport is a city that never stops. Skyscrapers mirror the winter sky, and the streets teem with professionals, students, and tourists. Even before dawn, the city hums, subways rumble, cabs navigate traffic, and crowds follow their routines. Winter's chill is harsh, with icy winds and snow that turns to slush. Streetlights cast a cold glow, revealing those often overlooked, like Eli, sitting against a storefront in a tattered jacket and frayed beanie, his gloves torn and boots worn. As people hurried past, few took notice of his shivering form. Eli once had a job, an apartment, and stability. But after losing his job and being evicted, he drifted into the streets, too proud to ask for help, and the shelters were always full. Over time, he grew accustomed to the cold glances and invisibility. One morning, a shift occurred quietly in the bustling city. Keanu Reeves stepped out of a sedan, dressed simply in a dark coat and scarf. Moving without fanfare, his gaze was drawn to Eli, who had blended into the shadows behind him. Keanu slowed his stride. While dozens of passers-by hurried on, clutching their coats against the wind, he veered slightly off the main path. He took in the sight of Eli, noting the man's trembling fingers and the weariness that lined his face. Without hesitation, Keanu approached and crouched down, bringing himself to Eli's eye level. "Are you hungry?" Keanu asked, his voice calm yet infused with genuine concern. Eli looked up, startled. It took him a moment to grasp that this question was directed at him, and even longer to realize who was asking. Ultimately, the identity of the man posed less of a shock than the simple fact that anyone bothered to speak kindly to him at all. I don't expect anything anymore," Eli replied in a raspy tone, his words barely audible over the hiss of passing buses. Keanu's eyes softened. He nodded, as though acknowledging the raw truth in Eli's statement. Without further talk, he stood, walked a few steps to a nearby coffee shop, and returned minutes later carrying a steaming cup of coffee in a paper bag. "Here," Keanu said quietly, extending them toward Eli. Eli stared at the offering as if it were a mirage. He hesitated, a surge of conflicting emotions swirling inside him. Was this pity? Was it genuine kindness? Would it be snatched away the moment he reached out? Eventually, the gnawing hunger in his belly prompted him to take the items, his icy fingers trembling around the cup's warmth. "Thank you," he whispered. Keanu didn't just hand off the food and leave. Instead, he eased himself onto the ground beside Eli, ignoring the stares of onlookers. Cars honked, pedestrians milled about, and a few recognized Keanu from a distance, pausing to do a double-take. But for Eli, the world seemed to slow to a hush. In the quiet that formed between them, he sipped the coffee, feeling the heat slip down his throat and spread through his chest. Keanu asked questions, not with the interrogation style so many used when poking into the lives of the homeless, but with genuine empathy. He listened as Eli recounted the unraveling of his life, the lost warehouse job, the mounting bills, the nights spent curled in corners where security guards wouldn't shoo him away. He spoke of the shelters that filled up so quickly, leaving him outside on nights when the temperature dipped below freezing. Keanu responded with measured silence, letting Eli's words take up the space they deserved. At one point, Eli paused, embarrassment flickering in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice trembling with both curiosity and a tinge of fear. "Why would someone like you stop for someone like me?" Keanu's reply was soft but unwavering. "Because you matter," he said, his gaze meeting Eli's. "And sometimes, all a person needs is a reminder that they're not invisible." A lump formed in Eli's throat. He had grown so used to feeling overlooked, reduced to a nuisance on the sidewalk, that hearing these words felt almost surreal. For a moment, tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, and he quickly lowered his gaze, not wanting to appear weak. Yet, it was that very moment of vulnerability that seemed to convey more than any heartfelt speech could. When Eli finished the coffee and sandwich, Keanu reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a small slip of paper. He scribbled down a phone number, then gently placed it in Eli's hand. "I know you might not be ready today, or tomorrow," Keanu said, "but if you ever decide you want help finding a place to stay or a way to get back on your feet, call this number. Tell them you spoke to me." Eli stared at the slip of paper, trying to process what it represented. For so long, he had drifted under the assumption that no options remained, that the downward spiral he found himself in had no exit. Yet here was a direct point of contact for an outreach program, presumably one that could connect him with temporary housing, possible employment leads, and other forms of support. "Thank you," Eli managed, words trembling in the cold air. Keanu's expression showed a mix of kindness and quiet resolve. "Everyone deserves a chance. Remember that." Shortly after, Keanu stood, brushing stray snowflakes from his coat. A few bystanders who recognized him stepped forward with phones, but Keanu offered them only a polite nod and continued on his way. His brief, meaningful conversation with Eli was over. Yet, the trace of warmth he left behind lingered in Eli's mind like an ember in a darkened room. As fate would have it, a passerby had taken a short video of Keanu sitting on the curb with Eli. Within hours of posting it to a social media site, the clip garnered thousands of views. People commented on Keanu's humble gesture, some praising him for his compassion, others questioning if it were a publicity stunt. But for Eli, the conversation's significance dwarfed any public chatter. While viral fame often fizzles quickly, the enduring impact of a small act of kindness can shape a life. In the days that followed, Eli clutched that phone number as though it were a lifeline. His mind was at war with itself. Part of him feared rejection or humiliation. What if the outreach program turned him away, or didn't have space, or couldn't help him find work? Another part of him held on to a flicker of hope, newly ignited by Keanu's simple yet profound statement, "You matter." The cold intensified, and so did Eli's desperation. Night after night, he sought shelter under canopies or in cramped alcoves. He sometimes ventured to soup kitchens and day centers, but space was limited and resources stretched thin. Each time he felt the old despair creeping back, he'd unfold the slip of paper and trace the phone number with a finger, remembering the earnest look in Keanu's eyes. About a week after his encounter with Keanu, Eli found himself outside a modest community center with a payphone kiosk standing in front, one of the few remaining in an age dominated by cell phones. The afternoon sky was overcast, threatening more snowfall. Eli realized the forecast predicted especially frigid temperatures that night. If there was ever a time to seek help, it was now. Summoning his courage, Eli fished out a handful of coins he'd collected from spare change and inserted them into the payphone. He punched in the digits from the slip of paper, his heart pounding. Each ring seemed to last forever. "Good afternoon, Hope Reach Outreach," came a voice on the other end. "This is Rowan speaking. How can I help you?" Eli exhaled shakily, gripping the receiver. Hi. I was given this number by Keanu Reeves. He said you might be able to help me." There was a short pause. Eli wondered if Rowan would believe him. Then came a welcoming reply. "Ah, yes. We were told to expect a call. I'm glad you reached out. What's your name?" "Eli," he answered, voice trembling with a mix of relief and nerves. "Well, Eli," Rowan continued, "we have a couple of options. Are you somewhere safe right now?" Eli glanced around at the busy street, the looming clouds. "I'm outside, by a payphone," he said quietly. "All right. If you can make it to our center, we'll see if we have room in our transitional housing. We also have staff who can help you sort out documents, apply for jobs, and see about longer-term solutions." The phone call ended with a plan. Eli would show up at the outreach center the following morning. They'd hold a bed for him if possible, or provide an emergency voucher to another shelter if they were at capacity. Eli hung up, the dial tone echoing against the metal walls of the kiosk. He walked away, feeling as though the city around him had changed subtly. It was the same swirling mass of hurried strangers and frigid winds, but for the first time in months, he moved through it with a faint glimmer of hope. The next day, Eli navigated Lindenport's labyrinth of streets and bus lines until he arrived at Hope Reach Outreach. The building itself was modest, a rectangular structure of worn red bricks and narrow windows. A sign near the entrance displayed the organization's name in simple white letters. Eli stepped inside, the warmth of central heating washing over him like a blessing. The lobby had a row of plastic chairs and a reception desk staffed by a volunteer. He introduced himself, explained that Rowan was expecting him, and took a seat. Around him, other individuals waited, some looking nervous, others simply tired, their eyes reflecting stories of hardship. A faint smell of coffee and soup drifted in the air, a comforting reprieve from the cold outside. Soon, a tall woman with short black hair emerged from a side hallway. "Eli," she called, glancing at a clipboard. Eli stood, heart thumping. "I'm Rowan. Let's talk in my office." Her office was small but orderly, with motivational posters and a few potted plants offering a touch of brightness. Rowan offered Eli a chair and sat behind a battered desk stacked with folders. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. "We're going to do an intake interview, just to understand your situation. Then we'll figure out the best way to help." Eli nodded. He described his work history, how he'd once been a reliable warehouse employee, comfortable with manual labor. He explained his downward spiral, from losing his job to losing his home. Rowan took notes, occasionally asking questions about his physical health, legal issues, if any, and potential references who could verify his employment history. "We try to help people rebuild from the ground up," Rowan explained. "That usually starts with getting off the streets and having a secure place to sleep. We have a few beds in our transitional housing unit. It's shared living space, but it'll keep you out of this weather." Eli felt both relief and anxiety. Would he have to share a room with strangers who might pose a risk? But the alternative was braving another night on the sidewalk. He swallowed his concerns, reminding himself of Keanu's reassurance, everyone deserves a chance. Later that day, Rowan led Eli to a communal living area, a converted section of the building with rooms that housed multiple bunk beds. The environment was humble, but it was inside and relatively quiet. The overhead lighting was warm, contrasting sharply with the harsh fluorescent lights in some shelters. A few other residents sat on their bunks reading or chatting in low voices. "You'll bunk here for now," Rowan said, pointing to a bed with fresh linens. "It's not fancy, but it beats the cold. We've got a kitchen down the hall, a common area with chairs and a TV, and bathrooms at the end of the corridor. There's a curfew, 10 p.m. You'll also need to attend a weekly meeting with our counselors. Any questions?" Eli shook his head. "This is more than I expected. Thank you." Rowan offered him a gentle smile. "Don't thank me yet. Thank yourself for taking the step to call." That night, Eli lay on his bunk, staring up at the ceiling in disbelief at the turn his life had taken. For the first time in months, he slept under a roof, sheltered from the piercing wind. It was far from luxurious. He could still hear the coughs and murmurs of others who were in similar situations. But instead of hopelessness, he felt an undercurrent of cautious optimism. A small lamp near the bunk illuminated the tiny slip of paper with Keanu Reeves's phone number scrawled on it. He kept it as a reminder of how quickly life could change when someone believes you're worth helping. Over the following weeks, Eli settled into a routine that involved job skills workshops, group counseling sessions, and daily chores within the shelter. He relearned how to fill out online applications, something he hadn't done in years. He practiced interviews with volunteers who offered constructive feedback, helping him refine how he spoke about his work history and the gap caused by homelessness. One morning, while reviewing job listings on a shared computer, Eli found a potential position at a small packing facility on Lindenport's outskirts. The job required manual labor, an area where he had experience. With Roland's help, he updated his resume, carefully detailing his warehouse skills. When he clicked submit, a swell of nervous excitement ran through him. Day after day, he juggled the tasks of maintaining shelter life with the demands of job searching, gradually acclimating to the idea that maybe he could start rebuilding. He found that simple acts, like consistently waking up on time, keeping his sleeping area tidy, and being reliable in small volunteer tasks at the center, restored his sense of self-worth. In group counseling, he met others who had stories eerily similar to his own: a job lost, a family dispute, an illness that depleted savings. Each tale underscored how quickly one could slip through the cracks. Yet, the sense of camaraderie and mutual encouragement buoyed everyone. They recognized that each day spent in the transitional program was a chance to reshape their futures. During one counseling session, the topic of family came up. Eli listened as others recounted broken ties and lingering regrets. He found himself thinking of his sister, Layla, who lived in another town and with whom he had lost contact. Before the downward spiral, they had a close bond, texting and calling each other regularly. But once Eli's life began to collapse, he allowed shame to overshadow any attempts at reaching out. It took courage, but one evening, after finishing a volunteer shift cleaning the shelter's kitchen, he dialed Layla's number using the center's phone. His heart thundered with every ring. "Hello," came Layla's voice. For a moment, Eli couldn't speak. The flood of memories and guilt formed a knot in his throat. "Layla," he finally managed. It's Eli." A sharp intake of breath echoed over the line. "Eli. Where have you been? Are you okay?" His emotions spilled out in a shaky confession: the job loss, the eviction, the months on the street, and the day Keanu Reeves had reached out to him. He told her about the shelter, the transitional housing, and his hope for a job. Her stunned silence gave way to relief, and then a wave of concern tinged with a gentle admonishment for not calling sooner. "Eli, you have no idea how worried I was," Layla said softly. "I tried calling your old number, but it was disconnected. I even reached out to mutual friends. No one knew where you were." Eli apologized repeatedly. They spoke for nearly an hour, bridging a distance created not by physical miles alone, but by pride and despair. When he finally hung up, tears blurred his vision, but for once they were tears of hope. Knowing his family still cared lifted a burden he'd carried for too long. As the weeks passed, Eli continued applying for jobs, determined to capitalize on the stability he found at Hope Reach Outreach. Not all responses were positive. He faced rejections, sometimes accompanied by polite excuses, sometimes by curt dismissals. Each rejection stung, reminding him how precarious his situation remained. One late afternoon, he received a phone call at the shelter's front desk. A staff member beckoned him over. "Eli, it's for you," she said, offering the handset. He pressed it to his ear, bracing for disappointment. "Hello." A calm voice introduced itself as the hiring manager from the packing facility. "We'd like you to come in for an interview," they said. "Your resume indicates experience that could be valuable to our team." Excitement and nerves collided in Eli's chest. He jotted down the address and details, thanking the manager profusely. After the call, he stood in the lobby, eyes closed, feeling a sense of gratitude that nearly overwhelmed him. It was just an interview, no guarantee of employment, but for Eli, it symbolized a real chance to reclaim his independence. On the morning of the interview, Eli dressed in a collared shirt and slacks donated by the outreach center. The clothes fit loosely, but he appeared presentable. A volunteer gave his hair a trim, and Rowan offered final words of encouragement. "You've come so far," she said, smiling. "Just be honest and show them the same determination we see here every day." The interview took place in a Spartan office overlooking a warehouse floor. The manager asked about Eli's work experience, reliability, and availability. Eli spoke candidly about his previous job, focusing on the skills he'd honed: inventory management, forklift operation, teamwork in a high-pressure environment. He addressed the gap in his employment with a measured honesty, explaining that life's hardships forced him into homelessness, but that he was actively working to rebuild. By the time the interview ended, Eli felt a rush of relief. He had done everything within his power. All that remained was to wait. Within 2 days, he got his answer: he was hired. The job wasn't high-paying, but it was steady and offered enough hours for Eli to start saving. More than that, it was a genuine opportunity to stand on his own again. He thanked Rowan and the staff at Hope Reach, crediting them for helping him find both the resources and the confidence to keep going. Eli moved from the communal dormitory to a modest room in a shared apartment affiliated with the outreach program, which he could afford once his paychecks came in. Though still humble, it felt like the biggest victory he had experienced in ages. On his first night there, he sat by the single window, gazing at the city lights. In the distance, he could hear the hum of traffic and the faint siren of an ambulance. Lindenport still teemed with countless people, many of whom might be facing challenges as daunting as his once were. The next time he had a free evening, Eli dropped by Hope Reach Outreach. He wanted to volunteer, pay forward what he'd received. When he arrived, Rowan greeted him with an enthusiastic wave. "Glad to see you back," she said, handing him an apron. "We could use help prepping dinner for folks." Eli spent the evening ladling soup and dishing out bread, sharing smiles with individuals who stepped forward to eat. Some recognized him as a fellow resident of the program. He exchanged quiet words of encouragement, telling them it was possible to find a foothold, no matter how impossible it seemed. Weeks turned into months. Eli continued to work diligently at the packing facility, saving what money he could and slowly piecing together the fragments of a stable life. He kept in touch with Layla, who cheered each small achievement from a distance, promising to visit soon. He also stayed engaged with the outreach center, occasionally seeing Rowan for check-ins and offering a hand to newer arrivals who reminded him of his past self. One afternoon, as he walked home from a shift, he caught a glimpse of a movie poster featuring Keanu Reeves. The image brought back a rush of memories, of that icy morning, the hot coffee and sandwich, and the simple statement that had pierced through his despair: "Because you matter." A wave of gratitude swept over him, and he found himself silently thanking Keanu for sparing that moment to affirm a stranger's worth. Eli's story, and the role Keanu Reeves played in it, reveals a timeless truth: small acts of kindness can set monumental changes in motion. The world we live in is vast, often indifferent, and filled with countless distractions. Yet when we choose to see someone else's struggle and take even a brief moment to show we care, we might be giving them the spark they need to look beyond their circumstances. Keanu did not solve all of Eli's problems in one grand gesture. Instead, he offered hope and a pathway toward genuine help. It was the willingness to pause, to ask a question, "Are you hungry?" and to listen without judgment that made the difference. The story reminds us that empathy can be the strongest antidote to despair. Sometimes, we all need a reminder that we are worthy, that our misfortunes do not define us, and that the humanity we share can triumph over the isolation life's hardships create. When someone like Keanu Reeves demonstrates kindness, it resonates not because of his fame, but because of the universal longing we all have to be seen and acknowledged. Eli's newfound life stands as a testament to the transformative power of a small act filled with genuine compassion. Now, I invite you to reflect on the moments you've had to look away, or perhaps the times when you've extended a hand. What if one considerate gesture of yours could spark another person's journey toward hope? It doesn't require wealth, celebrity, or grand gestures to let someone know they matter. Often, it's the simple offering of food, a warm conversation, or a contact for assistance that can alter a life's trajectory. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you join a community committed to spreading messages of empathy and understanding. In a world that sometimes feels overwhelmingly cold, remember that each of us holds the power to warm another's spirit. You never know when your small kindness could be the decisive factor helping someone rediscover their own worth and find the courage to start anew.